The Cheviot uplands brooded beneath a ragged gray sky, their heather dark shoulders draped in autumn mist that tasted of peat and coming rain. All along the ridges, campfires winked like restless embers, for on this eve of St. Adrian's Day, two kingdoms hovered at the brink of mortal reckoning. Scotland's host, steel bright, plaid bright, bristling with 14-foot pikes held by men who sang ballads of Bruce and Wallace, had crossed the River Tweed 20 days earlier under a flutter of lion-rampant banners. They came at the summons of James IV, the warrior king who spoke French to diplomats, Latin to priests, and the language of axe and sword to his people. Not since Bannockburn had a Scottish monarch marched so boldly onto English soil, yet to James the venture felt not rash, but righteous. England's lord, Henry VIII, had sailed for France to joust with glory, leaving only northern garrisons and an aging earl to mind his realm. The hour seemed perfect for Scotland to strike, to honor the old alliance with France, to balance old grudges with fresh conquest, perhaps even to capture Berwick or Durham before winter sealed the roads. Behind the king stretched a tapestry of Scotland in miniature. Highland clans garbed in mottled greens, lowland lairds armored in Milanese plate, lords of the Isles wielding two-handed claymores, border reavers astride lean ponies bred for theft, and thunderclap raids. Through the ranks roved priests hefting reliquaries and fiery-tongued bards promising fame beyond death. James himself rode a tall gray charger caparisoned in scarlet velvet, a saint's relic sewn at the breast, a golden crucifix glinting at his throat. On his hip hung a blade gifted by Pope Julius II, who had named the Scottish king Defender of the Faith for crusading zeal against the infidel. Yet crusade had yielded to frontier quarrel. James saw before him not Saracens, but Tudor outposts and sheep-dotted dales, and beyond them, a throne that once mocked Stuart ambition. From Norham to Ford Castle, artillery thundered as Scottish bombards cracked sandstone and showered courtyards with ruin. Towers surrendered. English sentries, starved for relief, slipped out under moonless skies. But fortune's smile proved fickle. Weather turned sullen. Supply trains lagged. The king's allies from the Isles rode homeward when loot disappointed. Meanwhile, Thomas Howard, Earl of Surrey, 60 years old, lean as an oaken stave and twice as hard, summoned every levy from Yorkshire to Lancashire. He knew the northern shires bled white in Henry's absence, yet pride and necessity steeled him. With letters sealed by the royal signet, he commanded musters at Newcastle, Richmond, and Pontefract, calling forth archers seasoned on Scottish forays, bill men whose fathers had swung the same crook-bladed polearms at Towton and Bosworth, and men at arms clad in plate blackened with lamp soot. Surrey's son, Edmund, the Lord Admiral, brought gunners and seamen fresh from patrolling the Channel, their ordnance light but plentiful. Together, they vowed to block the invader before he reached the rich pastures of the Tyne. Thus September's first week passed in a deadly dance of maneuver. James captured the ruined Peel Tower of Étal, then camped atop the heights of Flodden Edge, a ridge rising like a bastion above the mill-swift River Till. There, he deployed artillery heavier than any yet seen in Britain, bronze culverins weighing 2 tons each, iron serpents on carved carriages, mighty 7 sisters that could hurl stone balls over half a mile. Below, the Scots built turf ramparts and dry stone gun emplacements, content to let hunger and pestilence ravage Surrey's host, should it attempt the steep ascent. Some captains urged the king to retire north with trophies taken, cannon, captives, cattle, before Surrey consolidated. But James yearned for verdict, not negotiation. Every heartbeat of delay echoed with the accusations of his queen, Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's own sister, who now prayed at Holyrood for her husband's safety and her brother's restraint. James felt history's eyes fixed upon him. He would not retreat. Surrey circled like a wolf denied. On the 8th of September, he marched upriver, crossing the Till at Twisel Bridge beneath a damp dawn. Brown floodwater lapped the arches, but Surrey's columns splashed across, drums beating a cadence older than Agincourt. They swung southwest, aiming to cut James off from Scotland and force battle on ground of Surrey's choosing. Scouts raced back to Flodden Edge with news that chilled Scottish spines. The English were behind them, threatening their line of retreat. James consulted his captains amid swirling rain. Some counseled entrenchment, others urged night withdrawal. The king chose advance. He would descend the ridge, smash Surrey, and march home crowned with victory. Yet, geography betrayed valor. The Scots trudged down slippery slopes churned into clay by days of drizzle. Each pike weighed 15 pounds. Each man bore armor, food, and hope, the heaviest burden of all. They reached the base in ragged order, only to find themselves hemmed by marshy channels of the Palandsburn and Branxton streams. Front ranks sank ankle-deep, rear ranks bunched and cursed. To the north, Surrey arrayed his army along Branxton Hill, a modest rise but dry, firm, and crowned by massed archers whose longbows hissed like locusts when loosed. English cannon, smaller than Scotland's, but mounted higher, angled shot downward in cruel plunges. Thus the very artillery James had trumpeted, as his invincible fist now wallowed useless at boggy low ground, unable to raise muzzles high enough to range the hill. The battle opened with thunderclap trails of iron and smoke. Scottish gunners wrestled to torque elevation screws, but round after round buried itself in sodden turf well below the English line. English serpentines answered with iron balls that smashed pike blocks apart, the shriek of shrapnel mingling with Gaelic laments. Sensing the imbalance, James ordered an advance. Trumpets blared, standards dipped, and the great hedge of Scot pikes surged forward in dense schiltrons 4,000 strong. Men stamped to the rhythm of pipe and drum, 13-foot spearheads bristling like a silver wheat field against the sky. They intended to replicate Swiss victories over Burgundy, to drive their steel forest uphill and punch straight through English bills and bows. But Branxton's slope proved treacherous. Rain-greased mud sucked at boots. Pikes angled upward too steeply, losing the killing thrust's sweet spot. Meanwhile, English archers, stationed on flanks, shot clouds of ash, feathered arrows that fell at plunging angles, finding gaps beneath kettle hats and into armpits unprotected by plate. Dogs of war, mastiffs loosed by Surrey, darted in, snapping at ankles, sowing disorder. Still the Scots came on, roaring Clan Gordon and Clan Home war cries until steel met steel in a clamorous clang. Here, Pike encountered Red Bill. The English billhook, shorter than a pike yet lighter and double-edged with a hooked beak, worked wickedly in close quarters. Once the pike's initial momentum stalled, bill men waded under the spearheads, hacking shafts in two, pulling points aside. then ripping open mail shirts with the hook's inward curve. English men-at-arms joined, hewing with poleaxes, bashing with dagged maces. Fighting devolved into knots of pushing, cursing men knee-deep in churned blood mud, their faces speckled with chalky clay and sooty gunpowder. Pipers shrilled above the din, trying to keep ranks in cadence, but English drums pounded a harder rhythm. Cut, hook, hammer. On the Scottish right, the Earls of Home and Huntly swept down in a flanking assault intended to roll the English left. Their borders horsemen, sleek Galloways, riders armed with spears and wheel-locked pistols, initially overran a company of Welsh archers, sending green feathered arrows scattering like startled birds. Yet discipline unraveled when they glimpsed the baggage park sparkling with English banners and rumored chests of coin. Many peeled off to plunder, leaving their king's main line exposed. Surrey's son, Admiral Edmund, countercharged with reserve bill men and Northumberland men-at-arms, driving stragglers back into marsh by the River Till. There, horse hooves bogged, riders dismounted, blades flashed in grisly crescents beneath a rain that stung like sleet. The Scottish left, led by Lord Crawford and the Earls of Argyll and Lennox, fared little better. They had to cross the Branxton stream under arrow fire, dress ranks on the far bank, then climb a second slope. English commander Sir Edward Stanley, cousin to the Kingmaker family that had flipped the scales at Bosworth, waited with Cheshire bowmen and Lancashire bills. Their arrows, shot in the cloth yard deep, thumped into Scots' shields. Then bills swept in savage arcs. Crawford fell skewered through the visor. Argyll died with a war knife buried in his throat. Leaderless, the left wing crumbled, staggering back across the stream in red eddies. At the center raged the battle's molten heart, where James IV fought in person, astride a great brown charger foaming with sweat, the Scottish royal banner fluttering above. He wore gilded Milanese plate, an open-faced sallet, and a velvet surcoat embroidered with thistles. Around him clustered the Scottish nobility, Earls of Bothwell, Glencairn, Cassilis, forming a glittering phalanx that drove spears like piston strokes into English bills. Surrey responded by pressing his own men at arms forward, knights whose surcoats bore Howard Talbots and Mowbray lions, wielding two-handed swords honed on French plate. Steel shrieked on steel. Polearms snapped. Men wrestled in mud thick as new mortar, stabbing with rondel daggers when longer weapons failed. Suddenly, a shout rippled through the Scottish rear. English cavalry massing to the north. It was Stanley's wing, having routed the Scots' left, now curling like a scythe around the flank toward the baggage train. Panic flickered. Some pikemen looked over shoulders. Cohesion faltered. James saw the danger and made a choice few kings would dare. He spurred forward, aiming straight for Surrey's personal guard. If he could kill or capture the Earl, English resolve might fracture. Down Branxton Hill thundered Scotland's monarch, sword raised, a comet tail of household knights behind. They smashed into Surrey's circle with thunderous impact, unhorsing the Sheriff of Yorkshire, shattering shields, driving the English banner back a spear's length. For a heartbeat, victory seemed within James's mailed grasp. But numbers and ground betrayed him again. English bills pressed on his flanks. Arrows feathered into the royal charger's neck, toppling horse and king together. James rose, face smeared with mud and blood, swinging his sword in great arcs, lopping the head clean off an English sergeant. Surrey's men-at-arms closed in, thrusting spears beneath the rim of James's breastplate, piercing his side, ripping open chain links. Legend says the king took 5 wounds, 7 wounds, perhaps 10, each time slashing back with lion-hearted fury until weight of steel bore him down. When the crush heaved aside a moment later, Scotland's king lay lifeless amid trampled thistles, his gloved hand still locked around the hilt of the papal sword. Word of the king's fall tore through Scottish lines like winter wind through torn thatch. Men who had marched south singing "Flowers of the Forest" now felt the bloom of courage wilt. Command devolved upon nobles dead, scattered or quarreling. The great Pike blocks, their shafts hacked short, sagged inward. English bills advanced step by pitiless step, chanting the old saint's war cry, "St. George, a Howard, a Howard." By dusk, the field belonged to England. Smoke spiraled from shattered gun carriages, dying horses screamed, wounded men groped blind in mud. A harvest moon rose pale over Branxton Hill as Surrey, exhausted, knelt to give thanks. Around him lay 10,000 Scottish dead, including 12 earls, 15 lords, countless knights, and their anointed king. Surrey ordered torches lit so searchers might find James among the fallen. At midnight, they discovered him, face unrecognizable, surcoat torn, yet bearing the telltale mark of the thistle. His body, when washed, revealed a rosary twisted around mailed fingers and a parchment prayer against sudden death. Surrey had the corpse borne gently to Berwick, then south to Richmond, evidence of triumph for Henry VIII upon his French campaign. England mourned its own fallen, 1,500 souls, but rejoiced that the northern frontier stood secure. North of the Tweed, the news loomed like an eclipse. Edinburgh's bells tolled, widows lined the kirkyards. An infant prince, James V, inherited a throne ringed by regents and foreign perils. Bards lamented, "The flowers of the forest are all wade away," their dirge echoing through glens for centuries. Clan feuds flared. Border raids resumed. Yet Flodden proved more than bereavement. It forged a cautionary tale of ambition's cost, of new warfare where gunpowder and terrain outweighed chivalric charge. The great schiltron of pikemen, once Europe's terror, had shattered against English bills wielded by yeomen whose grandfathers tilled the same soil they died defending. For England, Flodden glittered like a second Agincourt, buttressing Tudor legitimacy and dimming threats behind, while Henry VIII pursued glory overseas. But the triumph carried lessons too. Surrey's bills and bows had prevailed not by divine favor alone, but by logistics, fieldcraft, and the flexible brutality of mixed arms. Future English commanders would nurture those qualities from Solway Moss to Pinkie Cleugh, until union of crowns rendered the border wars moot a century later. Yet, walk the ridge of Branxton on a still September evening, and the past stirs with uneasy whispers. Wind rattles the grass where pikes once bristled. Skylarks sing above furrows that drank nobles' blood. And in the hush between bird call and breeze, one may sense the muffled thunder of a royal charge that met its doom in sucking mud. Flodden remains Scotland's blackest day, but also a testament. That courage alone, untethered from prudence, can drown kingdoms in sorrow deeper than any marsh.